Hello, welcome back to the Creative Resistance Podcast. I'm Scott Cassidy, and today's conversation is a significant and personal one for me, both as host of the podcast and as someone who spent 10 years as an operational firefighter, leaving in 2014 when I watched commander in an Edinburgh station. Today I'm joined by Gus Sproul, the Scottish Regional Chair of the Fire Brigade Union. Now, when people think of unions, they often think of picket lines and pay disputes. And while that's part of it, Gus and I dive into the much deeper, often unseen work of the FBU. We discuss a union's role as a source of political education, a bulwark against extremism, and their incredible legacy of international solidarity, even sending life-saving equipment to firefighters who work under occupation in places such as Palestine. But we also tackle a subject that is incredibly close to home for me. As a 10-year veteran of the service and someone currently living with a form of incurable leukemia, we discuss the harrowing reality of occupational cancer in the fire service. The statistics are frankly terrifying, with firefighters over 3 times more likely to die from cancer than the general public, and for those in their late 30s, the cancer rate is over 300% higher than in other professions. Gus and I talk about the fight for presumptive legislation, ensuring that when a firefighter gets sick, the system steps up instead of looking the other way. This is a conversation about community, the global working class, and the literal fight for lives. Here is my conversation with Gus Sproul of the FBU. Very warm welcome to Gus Sproul, to the Creative Resistance Podcast. How are you, pal?
I'm good, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice one. It's just to give some context. So, Gus is the Scottish Regional Chair of the FBU. And for a lot of listeners, will have no idea, I spent 10 years in the fire service from about 2004 to 2014. So Gus and I were colleagues and knew each other back then, and then reconnected in the kind of fat dad club at climbing. Our kids go climbing together. So we were sort of got chatting at that point, and it's been really good, sort of blithering through bits and bobs about the fire service and everything else in life as well. So obviously you're here today as a rep of the FBU, and we're going to dive into sort of trade unionism, the role of trade unions in the world today, and various other bits and bobs. But just to let the listeners know, we're recording this at your beautiful house in Portobello, Edinburgh seaside, on a beautiful sunny day. So yeah, cheers for having me in and providing the coffee.
No, it's great to have you, Scott.
Nice one, man. Okay, let's get stuck straight in. So obviously, we're living in a time of mad economic and social shift. You just need to put the news on, and it's pretty terrifying. So we've got geopolitical chaos and everything that goes with that. So linking to the trade union stuff, when I was growing up in the 80s, trade unions it felt to me like they were much more in the news. It might have been my house. My dad would describe people as, he's a good union man. And I could still name the people who would describe as a good union man. So it was kind of at the heart of community, and it meant something. I'm not sure that feeling's as widespread today as it was then. So I'd love to know what you see as the kind of fundamental role of trade unionism in 2026, and what was the specific spark that led you to both join the FBU and then take on a full-time role.
Yeah, I'd agree that there's a big difference in how trade unions are perceived, or people's knowledge of trade unions now. We've, as we'll touch on later on, we've just recently been around the whole of the fire stations in the east of Scotland, chatting to members, talking about the union, talking about some of the bigger things that are going on for us just now. And there's a recurring theme, and speaking to other trade unions from other unions as well, that there's a kind of lack of education through young people about the importance of trade unions and what they are. But it's no real surprise, considering how under attack trade unions have been since the 80s. Thatcher took on the NUN, and everybody's aware of the miners' strike and the kind of brutality that was forced upon them by the state. And it's no coincidence that as trade union membership has declined, we've seen real-term workers' wages decline in exactly the same trajectory. So yeah, it's definitely, there's definitely been a big change in how we're perceived. But I think, in answer to your question about the role of trade unions in 2026, I think we've got a massive part to play in helping to try and get us through these periods of sort of strange move to the right that we're seeing in politics, and the impact on workers. I mean, it's workers and the working class that feel the brunt of all these societal changes. The economic, the crash in 2008 led to, for us, a pay freeze for a number of years, then a number of years of 1% and then managed to claw up to 2% for a number of years. And we went through, over a decade of wage stagnation because of that. So, I think the trade unions have such an important role to play in trying to be that bulwark against the shift to the right. And we've seen, it's no surprise that Andrea Jenkins and Reform are saying that they're no fans of trade unions. It's us that have pushed. We've had to fight for workers' rights. We've had to fight for, the most basic provisions of toilets and building sites. The most basic provision of PPE on building sites. I've just been listening to a podcast from Ricky Thomason talking about the builder strikes in 1972, how hard they had to fight. He ended up going to jail. His mate was given a chemical cosh so often that he never recovered from that. And they had to fight because there were hundreds of construction workers being killed every year. There were tens of thousands being, really badly injured. And it took them that kind of level of fight, actually having to go to jail repeatedly and being brutalised by the state just to get what we now see as the most basic workplace provision. So, yeah, I think providing education for the working classes like we do through the trade union movement on being anti-war, being anti-fascist, being anti-racist, and having workers being in workplaces all the time, having access to and being from all the different communities across the country. It's trade unions that can drive those conversations, and it's face-to-face conversations where we'll make the difference in trying to make sure that what's going on just now has some kind of pushback against it, because it does feel like we are kind of under attack.
Up against it,
yeah,
sure.
Definitely.
And were you, on a personal level, were you then an engaged member of the union before you decided to kind of stand for to become a rep and actually do more?
Well, it was like when I started in 2000. Okay. You went to McDonald Road fire station. You, on your first day, you were given loads of bits of paper to sign. Lots of different people came in and told you that they were taking money out your wages. You didn't have much choice. The union was one of those,
100%.
And I signed up, and my mum and dad were both teachers. My dad was a PE teacher. My mum worked in a special school our life. But we didn't really talk about trade unionism in the house. They both went on strike in the teacher strikes, but we never really talked about it. And they felt like a bit of an alien species to me. We weren't particularly close. So when I joined the fire brigade, joined the union, but I wasn't a particularly active member. I went to union meetings, but within 2 years we were on strike. So that was a massive kind of education,
of fire,
and a massive change. Yeah. And then the years that followed that. There's a group of people that I met through my partner who were all either trade union reps or working within the trade union movement, and I got, I would say, all my political education through them, and that was sitting having pints at parties and chatting. And I said this at a branch meeting the other day, and somebody was like, "You must vote every year and do good parties." But I do. That's that's where I got my whole political education, and all of those people have gone on and are, in some really senior positions, in whether it's the STC or PCS or various different unions. But the consequence of me knowing those people and having those conversations at parties was that when Denise Christie came to my fire station during, I can't remember what we're talking about, I think it was a 5-foot street system or something, having a branch meeting, and I was asking questions and all that, she was like, "Well, there's no branch rep here, Gus." Yeah. And I didn't want to be a branch rep because I thought I was busy, I was training all the time. And she kind of, pointed out the hypocrisy of my position when all my mates are in the movement and are working really hard. And she's like, somebody's got to do it. And so I put my hat, I'd said I would do it because the silence was kind of deafening in the branch. Nobody else wanted to do it. And so I became a rep. I got quite quickly met up with John McKenzie, who was the area secretary at the time, and we started working really closely together, and I just kind of got pulled along.
And just for those listeners, also Denise, her role at that point?
Sorry, yeah, Denise Christie was the Scottish Regional Secretary at that point, yeah. And then John McKenzie was the area secretary, and he's now the Scottish Regional Secretary. So, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. I have no ambition to be a full-time trade unionist. It kind of happened by itself. But now that I'm in this role, especially a full-time role, I love what I do. It's the best thing I've done in my career.
Is that unusual for trade unions to have people step out of doing their actual job and becoming a full-time trade unionist. Is that specific to the FBU, or does that happen elsewhere as well?
I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of the bigger unions have got full-time staff, but they're employed by the union rather than being what we are. We're all lay officials in the FBU. You know, there are some staff members, obviously, but
I think there's a real power in that, though. The fact that you're speaking to branch members and you've done the job that they're doing. You're not someone that's come in straight from uni or whatever and hasn't done it. So there must be a power in that for you guys.
I think so. I mean, it'll have its downfall. I don't know any different because this is all we've done. But yeah, being a specific single industry trade union, I think, is really beneficial for us. I mean, there are fantastic people who work for Unison, Unite, GMB, PCS, massive unions, but yeah, they are kind of getting parachuted in to workplaces to discuss issues that they maybe not had direct involvement with. So yeah, I think it is pretty powerful for us, and it's almost like the senior officers used to say to us, "I've done your job, son."
Yeah, 25 years ago, and badly.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think there is a real power in that, and it's all I know. So it's something that I have a huge personal vested interest in, that I want to do the best for our members. I want to leave when I retire, I want to try and leave, the Fire and Rescue Service and the FBU in a better state than I came into it. That's kind of like the ultimate goal.
Brilliant. And even, that passion shines through, even the conversations we've had in recent kind of months. Like, I think the passion for the trade union movement comes through, but also for the fire service as a whole, which is vastly important. So moving on to a little bit about the FBU in particular. I think FBU, now obviously I knew of it when I was in the fire service. I've been out longer than I was in now. I left in 2014 after 10 years. But the FBU as a union has to be one of the most well-known. They're very visible when it comes to trade unionism on the news. And I think some of that is perhaps because of the history. So the FBU's got a long history of standing on the picket line for fire-related and wider political causes as well, both at home and abroad. Thinking specifically of the Dundee to Nablus project, which I remember one of the FBU reps being Gavin Barry, who was FBU rep when I was involved, been very passionate about as well, where Scottish firefighters faced incredible hurdles to get equipment to comrades over in Palestine, and there was fire engines taken by the Israelis and various other things. We can maybe chat a bit more detail about that, but there's also the work that FBU have done on anti-strike laws, meaning they're still inoperable up here in Scotland. So why is it a core part of the FBU's DNA to show up for these wider political movements? And how does that international solidarity make your local branches stronger?
It's an interesting question. It's something that, the FBU were doing, had a very outward look, had an outward looking perspective for years. I mean, in 1982, Ken Cameron, the General Secretary at that time, was the first. He took a motion to the TUC, and I think it was the first international motion from a trade union condemning the Israeli government's invasion of Lebanon, and that was 1982. Wow. He met with, he was very involved in the apartheid movement, met with Mandela. Mandela's an honorary member, or was an honorary member of the FBU. There's pictures of him with Yasser Arafat. There's pictures of him meeting Fidel Castro. During the miners' strike, the FBU under Ken Cameron took £50,000 in a bag and went and met members of the NUM to put that to their fund to try and help these people get through the brutal conditions of the strike they were under. So I think that legacy, I don't know what drove Ken Cameron to do that, but that legacy and the idea that kind of phrase that they always use, that there's a world outside the fire station doors. Yeah, I think it's really, really important. And I know there'll be members that of any trade union that wonder why any of us are interested in anything outside of that. And this idea that we should only be campaigning for pay terms and conditions is there's a place for that. Mm-hmm. But what I don't think a lot of people realise is that the majority of the work, the kind of solidarity work that trade union reps and activists and officials and that do, most of it's done in their spare time. Yeah. My Monday to Friday work is all rooted right in the workplace. If you look at...
You're dealing with fire brigade specific stuff.
All the time, and if I share a lot of articles about what's going on in Palestine just now. I learnt about that conflict through the group of people I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. And so it's through the trade union movement kind of directly or indirectly that I learnt about that struggle, and I snapped my knee at training, and in the time that I had off, I sat and read the papers. I read the Independent and Guardian. Both of them were really good papers at that time, and I couldn't believe what I was reading about what was going on in Gaza. So to see that develop from what would that be in 2004, I think, first started reading about it, to now, it's kind of heartbreaking to see the trajectory that was kind of predicted and what the Israelis wanted to do for all that time. But if we're taking back to the kind of FBU part of it, I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of the fact that we did whatever we could to try and take equipment and training over to firefighters who are just like us. Mm-hmm. I've got more in common with the firefighters in Nablus than I do with the billionaire or the multi-millionaire media class that are telling me I should take them.
100%, man.
You know, and seeing people going to, you know, try to go to jobs and with equipment that's falling apart without anything close to the most appropriate PPE getting shot at. You know, that when we took when the first two fire engines were taken over by Jim McGlone, Gavin Barry and all that, I've got to shout out to them. The work that they did was phenomenal. And again, this was stuff that they did in their own time. Yeah. But they had the back in the FBU. They also had the back in the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. So if the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service employees that disagree with this, their employers also bought into this, you know. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so anyway, when they're taking the fire engines over, they had to have them modified, so they'd move the steering wheel to the other side so that the Israelis snipers could shoot the drivers at the checkpoints. I mean, the things that go on. I mean, we just passed the anniversary of the killing of those 15 paramedics and civil defence workers, which is firefighters. Yeah. There was a fire engine and several ambulances that were ambushed by the Israelis, by the IDF, and they killed everybody. And the only reason we found out was there was one of the ambulance workers who was on the phone to his mother and left the phone open. They had the recording, didn't they? And had the recording. Yeah. And there's been forensic sort of a forensic audio investigation done by, I don't know, somebody, I can't remember the name of the organisation. And the IDF put like 900 bullets into these people. And then they dug a ditch and they pushed their vehicles into that ditch and covered them in earth. And this only came out because of that recording. So some of the things we were just talking earlier on about the amount of paramedics that have been killed straight away in Lebanon, the amount of hospitals and emergency workers that have been killed in the Iran war. And when I see those, I see people like us. Mm-hmm. I see people like our colleagues. You know, if you look at 9/11, what happened? 343 firefighters killed in that. Firefighters killed in Ukraine. Firefighters killed across the world. The people we'll touch on the decon campaign and firefighter cancers. And I see people in, you know, whether it's in Australia, New Zealand, the Czech Republic, America, these are people just like us that do exactly the same job as us. Yeah. And if there's anything that we can do to help them do our job just somewhere else, then I'm right behind it. And I think it's something we should be really proud of. And answer your question on how does it make our branches stronger? I think there's one of my remits is education in the FBU, and I think becoming educated in these conflicts, if our members understand what's going on, outside of their own employment, understanding how to, I don't know, make sense of the news, understanding where the biases and all that come from. Hopefully, we can, an educated working class is a powerful beast, and that's why they've tried to stop that. That's why that's why trade unions have to face anti-trade union legislation. That's why we're no friends of parties like Reform and the Tories. That's why they try, because who's it said it? Bill Hicks had said they want you just smart enough to work the machines, but dumb enough, not too dumb to ask the question why, right? It all feeds back into the same thing that I'm proud of what we do, and I think internationalism, what we're seeing just now, if there's any way that the people that we work with become educated about these conflicts, maybe we can vote in people who don't want to perpetuate war. We can vote in candidates that are have an outlook on the world that's based in peace and anti-fascism and anti-racism. We can try and kind of rebuild society. It's a haughty idea, but on the education courses that we run, we have a bit of a laugh about. We try to teach reps to have some confidence, understand their role, their rights, their responsibilities, but we also have a wee laugh about saying, like, go out and change the world. And we kind of mean that, you know?
Totally. I think that like the ability to challenge, but rooted in education, is something that I think a lot of people don't realise trade unions do. That the education side of it, I think
massive,
often flies like under the radar. People aren't aware of that. Actually, this is about, like you say, educating the working classes to ask the question, well, why were we asked to do that? Why should we do it in an unsafe manner? And as you say, like, stand up and challenge those bastards that are trying to basically do away with, the kind of trade union and that kind of organised resistance type thing. So
it's a really important point.
Yeah.
And I think, solidarity is a real thing.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly powerful thing when you're part of that. When we were on strike in 2002, when somebody would go past the picket line and peep their horn, wave and all that, it's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
When FBU members have gone and stood on the picket lines of other trade unionists, I know the impact it can. I spoke at an EIS rally, and a lot of people came up to me after saying how much it meant to them to have that kind of cross union solidarity. And what you said there about having the confidence to stand up and challenge stuff, if we've not got the confidence to point out, the incredibly obvious injustice of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment, I don't know what that says about us. We have to have the confidence to challenge bad workplace practices, and we've got to have we should have the same confidence to stand up and say that the killing of under 65 children in a girls' school on the first day of an insane war, we should be able to stand up and challenge that as well,
Yeah. I also think there's something so powerful about that kind of solidarity at branch level, then at regional level, then at national level. And then if you keep like expanding it out, so you then go international, like you've said there, but you've seen people who are just like us in other countries. That's just one trade union, that's just for the fire service. But actually you do that for education, you do that for healthcare. That's a powerful thing. And I think that's what the powers that be are scared of. So yeah, it's incredible. And it's even just chatting there, it's so clear why it's important.
Yeah.
So clear.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. One of the other things that has always struck me as well, I know the FBU better than other trade unions, so referring to that, is that the FBU seems very proud of its own history. And even like you were saying there, you feel a sense of pride and gratitude for those people that that came before and did their thing with the equipment to Palestine. So yeah, FBU curating its own history. The red plaque scheme to preserve the memory of fallen firefighters. I was amazed to read when I was researching just before we chatted that they put up a plaque for a guy called William Fraser. I think it was 110 years after he died up in Aberdeen. Why is it important for the union to take ownership of its own monuments and stories rather than leaving that kind of working class history to be written or forgotten by the sort of official history books?
I think it's a great question, and the red plaque scheme is a phenomenal piece of work that the FBU do, and I've got to give a massive shout out to Fiona Hart. She's a regional treasurer, one of the wee tiny team of us that run the union in Scotland. She that's one of her remits, and she does such a fantastic job with this. It's when you go to these events and you meet the families of these firefighters from 100 and odd years ago, the pride that they have in the job that their loved ones did.
Yeah.
The pride that has in the community, and recently they've been involved in local schools and stuff, and getting local school kids to write a wee bit or do a wee project on it and stuff. It's a really beautiful side of the FBU. I think it's a phenomenal scheme that we've done, and it's rightly honouring people that have been killed just trying to protect their communities. But your question about the rewriting of history, and one of the first kind of inspirations within the trade union movement was a woman called Jane McAlevey. She was the first education course I did was her. It was an organising course with her. She sadly died from cancer a couple of years ago. But as part of this organising course, she talked about how unions used to provide like community events. Remember in the fire brigade, we used to have super teams.
Yeah,
we had this thing where everybody would come together. You'd have each watch have a team. You'd play all these games that nobody was particularly good at, right? And we all had a few pints after. It was a really good laugh. It kind of brought a lot of people together. These things have kind of been lost a bit, and I think they've been lost throughout society as institutions are sort of either disappear or weakened. Whether it's like, I don't know, the Women's Institute, the Scouts, the British Legion, the Masons. Mm-hmm. All of these different things gave people some sort of some kind of agency, and I think at least the perception that they had some kind of access to power or some way of influencing things, whether it's through local politics or business or whatever. But I think with that being lost, I think it's a lot of what Jay McDavid talked about was how a lot of companies kind of bought over that and corporatized some of these events. So the events, say, I don't know, the union's barbecue every year.
Yeah.
The company would buy all the food and they'd badge it all up.
Yeah.
And they would, they'd have the CEO speak it or whatever, and it became part of the company's sort of thing rather than something that was owned by the workers and for the workers. So it's something that we, over the past few years, we've talked about this a lot, and we're trying to carve out a bit of time to put something aside to make the time to organise a big social event. But we just never had the time.
Yeah. So
I've got a couple of people who have done similar things within sports clubs and that want to do this. But yeah, I think it's a really important thing. After our big 2022 demo outside Parliament, we had about 700-800 firefighters there. Again, making the case for investment, making the case that you need to fully fund and resource a fire service. After that, we'd hired the Three Sisters, and hundreds of us went up. And there were fireys there that they hadn't seen each other since Gullen. So one of our reps up north, Gordie Sinclair, met Greg McLeod, one of the reps for Hoyk. So Gordie's up in Inverness, Greg's down in Hoyk, but they were at training school together. It was the first time they'd met since then. So it was magic. Lots of people making lots of connections and understanding that we are a union. We are across the country.
A community.
And a community, aye.
Ties in, we were speaking before that you're saying you listened to the previous episode of this where I spoke to Victoria McNulty. So anyone that hasn't listened to that, is a Glasgow-based poet writer who writes a lot about class and community and society. And one of the big things that she spoke about was the importance of a community's shared history being told by people within that community. So rather than bringing in someone from outside to collate and curate people's stories, why not empower the storytellers who are within every community? And again, when I was prepping this, reading about the Red Plaque scheme, I was like, of course it should be the FBU that's like actually marking these deaths, because they were people that were part of that same wider family. It links to your previous point about that solidarity and actually people recognising that they're part of something bigger than just themselves, which I think is so important. And I was in for 10 years, but we obviously lost Ewan Williamson during that time. I didn't personally know Ewan, but I know a lot of people who did and spoke very highly of him. But the impact that his death had, and for those listening that don't know that story, he died in a fire in central Edinburgh. But the wider impact and the kind of sadness and the sense of loss that went right throughout, at that point, Lothian Borders Fire and Rescue Service, but also wider, was huge. It was really stuck with me. And so when I was reading about these plaques being put up 110 years in the past, I can absolutely see why that is important to people. Yeah, I mean, that, Ewan's death was a huge, had such an impact on us. I mean, I was at the job. I was, me and one of my mates were, we were in the team that went in and found Ewan. Oh wow, didn't know that.
And so it's something that up until that point, I kind of felt invincible at my work. I'd had loads of near misses at jobs, and I just kind of laughed it off. Something that happened elsewhere, something you read about or watched on the news. Or you step, I don't know, I felt falling through a floor, or a lintel collapsing behind you. All these wee bits and pieces that happened that you just thought was kind of part of the job, and we always kind of had a laugh about it. And all the things that we went to, bad car crashes or fatal fires or whatever. None of it stuck with me. None of it affected me at all, but Ewan, that episode really did. In 2019, when we were at the centenary celebration of the FBU, we were down at an event at St Paul's in London, and one of the most powerful things I've seen, Ewan's sister Rebecca went up and she spoke and she said that she lost her brother in this job, and he loved what he did. And the one thing that she'd never tell anybody not to do this job, but what she would always tell him is that on the first day they have to join the FBU. The support the FBU gave to the family. And Denise Christie was outstanding with us, and she's still, we still see the family now. And Denise, there's been that point of contact for them for such a long time. But yeah, it's a really good scheme. It's something that I think gives families that opportunity to come and remember, whether it was in recent memory or way back. And, it's really, it's kind of hard to see a similar thing happen 3 years ago with Barry Martin
Of
as
course,
well.
yeah.
So it does. I mean, the red plaque stuff does bring home the reality of the job that we do, and the firefighter deaths, and it bring home the reality of the job that we do. And again, it makes it so important that we can push governments to fully fund and fully resource a fire service because of the horrendous outcomes that we can potentially face.
Totally. So I'm going to skip the question I was going to ask just because it's a bit of a seamless link for this one. So on that, there's two great examples of people locally who tragically were killed just going to work. So Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, I know they use something called Community Risk Index Modelling, so CRIM, a system to justify cuts. And the FBU has called that an algorithmic guessing game. Algorithms are at the heart of so much of what we do, in life today. But I was reading that response times have risen 18% in the last decade. So that's 18%.
Yeah.
In the time since I left, not because I've left. To be clear. But how do you guys, as the FBU, push back against that kind of spreadsheet culture to remind the politicians and those in charge that these numbers actually represent real lives and burning homes?
Yeah, it is the question with all this stuff, isn't it? How things are presented to make a case for, or to give, to decide where the axe is going to fall. I mean, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service will say that the programme of this kind of service delivery review that's going on just now isn't a cuts agenda, and it's not financially driven. But when we go back to September 2023, when 10 fire appliances were taken off the run, when we lost 166 firefighter posts at the stroke of a pen, the fire service was going to overspend by £11 million. They've got a statutory responsibility to balance their budget. That was absolutely a financial decision. The SDR, the service delivery options that have now been paused until after the election, the data used to justify them. I mean, I don't know how accurate it is. I don't think there's a want, or I don't think this is Department trying to manipulate figures. I think data can be used in different ways, obviously, but what we always try to make sure people understand is that human impact. So in October 2023, I think it was, for the listeners, I'll try and make this not complicated. If a fire station is away training somewhere, what we would traditionally do is bring another fire engine in to cover that station, because stations are obviously strategically placed around the country to provide fire cover for communities and population centres. In October 2023, East Kilbride was away doing rope training, and traditionally I think it was Springburn or Maryhill second machine that would go down and stand by. Both of those machines have been taken away in the appliance withdrawal, and the day that they were training, East Kilbride was left empty. A fire broke out in a sort of cul-de-sac of 7 houses. The first attending appliance got there in, I think it was 25 minutes, around about 25 minutes, and all 7 houses were destroyed. Now, you were in the job for 10 years. You're a watch commander at the end of your career. You've gotten a lot of house fires. I've been in the job for 25 years. I've seen fire spread from one house to the next and damage it. I've seen smoke damaging in neighbouring properties or adjacent properties. I've never seen 7 houses all destroyed.
No, never.
Now, there will be other things that happen there. High winds, building construction, whatever. But 7 houses completely destroyed, 7 families.
That's time, isn't it? It's 25 minutes.
Right, just 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, that happened just after that, and as part of the SDC General Council, we met with, it was somebody Yusuf that was the first minister at the time, and was saying, this is what happens. If response times go up, and you can say, you add 90 seconds on, and I mean, the minister, Siobhan Brown, had been, when she'd been pressed on the response times in the Parliament, she said it's complex, and sometimes it's down to firefighters putting on their PPE or road traffic calming measures and all that. While all that might add seconds here and there, having fire engines coming from much further afield,
from different towns or different bits
from different
of cities,
towns, different parts. And this idea we've got national assets, I get that, but for a fire engine to have to drive for 25, 35, 45, 55 minutes to get to house fire, we both know what the impact of that's going to be. So explaining, I mean, we do loads of political engagement. We meet and speak to politicians from right across the political spectrum. We have access to the Scottish Government at various different levels, from First Minister to DFM to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance recently. Meet with the SPAs and the sponsorship team. We talk to them at events, we talk to them at party conferences and all that. And this is what we try and put across, is that there's a human cost to this. If you are waiting, if you're smart, I mean, we used to talk about the golden hour at car crashes. For people who are listening to the podcast, that means, somebody in a serious accident, they've got about an hour between that crash and being on the operating table to increase, and anything past that, and their chance of survival are dramatically reduced. These things matter, and certainly when I started, I mean, fire stations used to have a pole in them for a reason. We would put our boots with our trousers over them and roll down for a reason.
Yeah.
We had, it was instilled in us when we started that every second counts. We had government adverts talking about that. In a fire, every second counts.
Yeah.
These remember the public information campaigns that would tell you, stop, drop, roll, if you're in a fire, get down low and get out and all that. This seems to be a thing of the past. And it pains me that at times when we're talking about you and we're talking about Barry, tragic deaths of firefighters in Bicester a couple of years ago, and all the other things that have happened to our members, and all the things that happen in local communities and the impact of all of that. It just feels, I don't think insulting's the right word, but something along those lines, that we're having to justify our existence every year. We're having to fight every year to get an extra 20-30 million pound into the Fire and Rescue Service budget just to kind of stand still. So, we try to put across the human cost of all these things. Response time's going up by 90 seconds as an average, or 2 minutes as an average, or we hear back of people driving like 25 minutes under blue lights to get to person's reported call. So, trying to humanise it and explain that to politicians. And they get, they do get it. They understand that, especially when they see the effects of that on the news. The fire in Glasgow is a pretty stark example of how quickly things can escalate.
Yeah, it's a great example. And sad as it is, I think it sometimes takes those big kind of headline-grabbing fires to actually get the message across that this is serious. Do you know what I mean? It's easy for them just to kind of almost out of sight, out of mind. So it's so important. And when you're trying to get that point across, so obviously there's statistics are there, but I think getting across that human angle, and actually naming the people that have been hurt, naming the families that have lost everything, it has to be the important thing, doesn't it?
I think it's the only way we can kind of sort of ensure that we honour what happened to these people, and it doesn't feel like they just become another name on a plaque somewhere, or another name on a list of fallen firefighters and stuff. So no, I think it's really important. Yeah,
definitely. Takes us full circle back to exactly that, the importance of actually marking it and naming those people as well. So cheers for that one, Gus. So moving on to something a bit more personal to me, and something we've spoken about at length, obviously not on the podcast, but recently. So not long after we first started seeing each other again, recently at climbing, I was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia. I remember your face when you came in and asked why I wasn't climbing. I explained that I was feeling shitty and why. And you then started speaking about some of the FBU research into cancer rates. So, in all honesty, I'd only heard about those stats after diagnosis. That was the first time I'd heard about it. I went home and did some reading. But having spent sort of 10 years on the run, so operational as a firefighter, and then a crew, then a watch manager, the stats stopped me in my tracks, in all honesty. I was kind of, I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. So it made me wonder whether the kind of powers that be had ignored the link between the job and the illness. So FBU bypassed employers to fund its own research. I can't remember the organisation that did it with. Can you remember?
So you did carry the research for us. Yeah, so it's a professor called Anna Stex, who worked for the University of Central Lancashire. Lancashire.
Right, okay. And the stats are sobering. So cancer rates for firefighters aged 35 to 39 are 323% higher than the general population. I mean, I did a bit of digging into the paper that you and I were speaking about. My particular type of cancer, 3.8 times more likely than anyone in the general population. And more worryingly, for me, at the moment, the prognosis for people that have been in the fire service with the type of cancer I have is much worse than it is with the general population as well. I had a situation recently where my first line of treatment failed. So the medication that I was on didn't work. And I was terrified going into that meeting because they did what was called a mutational analysis. And one of the things I'd read about was that if you've been a firefighter, you've got a greater chance of mutations within the cancer. Now, I didn't. The mutational analysis came back clear, but they still don't know why why those meds didn't work. Now, it's not that unusual, but I must admit it's at the back of my head now that, is this linked to something? And I'll never be able to prove it. And I'm not sitting here saying I have leukemia because of being a firefighter, but it really hit me. So how vital was it for the union to take ownership of the science and the data rather than waiting for the authorities to kind of admit there was a crisis?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Scott, that shook me to my core when I met you that night. It was, and it's so heartening to see your treatment working, or it was so heartening to see treatment working, and then it was pretty. I mean, I don't know, it must be so hard for you having that little setback, but yeah, it's been a difficult conversation, when we met about it. So I wish you all the best with this, and I'm sure you will get through this. Okay, yeah, the bit you said about mutational analysis isn't something I was aware of, but yeah, the evidence around firefighter cancers and firefighting being a carcinogenic occupation has been out there for years. The WHO had classified just a few years ago classified firefighting as a carcinogenic occupation. In parts of the States, Canada, I think Czech Republic, New Zealand, Australia, all across the world, there are places that have presumptive legislation where if you are a firefighter and you get cancer, it's presumed that was as a result of your job. Now, the FBU were pressing government on this for a long time, and we're being dismissed, and we were being told that the FBU were over-sensationalising the risks, that were overplaying the risks, that were blown out of proportion. And it took the FBU setting up their own lottery. It's called the Firefighters 100 Lottery. Anybody who wants to play that can play that. It's on the website. That's what funded the research into this. And the research at UCLan showed us exactly what we already knew. We knew that this was going to produce these kind of results because it's been the case in so many other parts of the world. So yeah, it's shameful that it's taken firefighters dying, firefighters contracting cancer, all the horrific effects of that on our profession. It's absolutely shameful on government that they fought us so hard on this. We've put this to the Scottish Government, and to be fair, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have been excellent. We presented Anna Stex to the sort of strategic leadership team in October 2022. We had a debate in Parliament with Anna, raised by Maggie Chapman, who I can't thank enough for that, and then we presented Anna to a number of MSPs afterwards, and they could ask her questions. So we've managed to get this in the public domain. It's known about now. And the service are trying to do what they can to mitigate the effects of this. Station design is important, but we also have to try and change culture on watches. And we have to. I think one of the most important things that we can do, doesn't cost any money, is getting people away from fires quicker. When you go in, when you're dirty, getting out and doing that whole shower within an hour thing. There's things we could be doing better now as a service. There are other things that will take significant investment, and things that have already taken significant investment. And in a period just now where we're having to fight for every penny, the impact of, say, for example, we have had an increase in our budget for this coming year, but the 2 years after that, the Scottish Government spending review dropped that budget back down to kind of flat cash settlement, which will be catastrophic for the fire service. That doesn't change enormously, and the catastrophic effects means halting programmes that would provide some of the other mitigations to prevent firefighter cancers. It's a horrific part of the job, but it can be mitigated. It can't be eradicated, the risk of it, but it can be mitigated through some very simple stuff and through other things that really need massive investment. There's a really good project that's going on just now. Again, I have to commend the service and the Scottish Government for called CivTech, where there's technology being developed that is going to be operational pretty soon that will measure, you can measure contaminants in real time.
Fantastic.
You can start to measure the effects on the body in real time at the operational instance. So we're looking for volunteers for that at the moment. So the progress is slow,
It's good to
but it's definitely
taking
progress.
it seriously though.
Yeah,
Because see what you're saying there about the kind of shower within an hour thing. I mean, it could just be my memory, but I don't remember any chat about stuff like that. Like you would be at incidents, you'd eat some food just in your fire gear, you'd get back, you'd maybe sit about and have a cup of tea before you bother jumping in the shower. Like all that time, just that kind of base level awareness just wasn't there.
When I chaired a debate with, we had our health and safety officer at the time, the national officer, a guy called Ricardo Latore, who'd been really involved in all that with Anna. I chaired this sort of debate that we had at McDonald Road. Anna was presenting our findings. I was chairing it, and I was shitting myself. Everything that she talked about were all the things that we did when we were young firefighters.
Yeah.
Every single bit of bad practice is how I grew up in the fire service. I can remember being, covered in dirt, you know, how thick black dirt, and somebody, going and getting us chippies, and we stand in, with smoke, dust moving around, manky, eating chips and all that. You go back to station, maybe get your head down, still filthy, or maybe all that black soot used to blow out your nose,
minging.
You never got rid of that smell. That smell was it was something that when I go to fire stations now, you smell a bit less and a bit less and a bit less.
That's good.
But it's something that I thought I quite liked that when I went into fire stations.
Yeah.
Even things like, keeping your gloves in your helmet.
Yeah.
So all the particles are coming off people's gloves and going onto their heads, and people getting cancers on their scalps and all that. And we've heard, mates of ours having really odd cancers. Like one of the guys had to have a big chunk of his tongue removed from sort of down in the inside of his left side of his neck. Another mate of ours, he had cancer in his eyeball.
Yeah.
These are really odd,
really rare
cancers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's brilliant to hear that work's going on though, and it's all kudos to the FBU for actually pushing it forward and being a voice, because I think it's needed. And as I say, I was totally ignorant of it, until we were chatting about it, and then went and did the reading and thought, fuck, like this is, I'll never be able to say it, but this is potentially part of what I'm facing and what I'm going through at the moment, Yeah.
So, and it's, I was, I've been having some sort of respiratory problems periodically over the last few years, and we've done a whole load of testing through part of this project. We tested 200 firefighters for a massive number of biometric markers, heavy metals, cancers, all of this, that we, again, funded by the FBU, but with funding given from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service as well. And I've got some kind of respiratory problem, some kind of slight blockage in my sort of, I don't know, somewhere in my respiratory tract. And I might have a mild asthma on the back of it. And that, the doctors think that could be, or there's a good chance that's occupational as well. So the fact that I've got to this stage of my career without it, I'm delighted about, but I don't know what's in the post. None of us do. And considering how bad the practices that we're all part of, it's a constant worry, man.
Definitely, yeah. No, I'm glad it's been dealt with. So, last question, and bringing us sort of full circle. So, I read a quote online from Scottish FBU rep Ted MacDonald, who said it's easier for those at the top to cut services if we're divided. So we've spoken a lot about that. What's the FBU doing now to ensure a unified front, and what support would you ask listeners to give to help firefighters as we move through the chaotic times we're in?
Well, I'll take the second bit first.
Yeah.
In all the campaigns that have been run, and Ted's been amazing at Leukaemia, where we've seen these really strong campaigns kind of grow up organically, it's been members at branches getting organised as a branch and saying, we're going to fight this because we believe in it.
Yeah.
Because they love their job, they work in their local communities, they're part of those local communities, they've got the local communities involved, they've gone out and informed the local community of what impact it would mean. For example, the second machine at Leukaemia being taken away, half in the fire cover in Leukaemia, and what that would mean for Leukaemia and the local communities. And the local community have really backed Ted and all that, and because we're part of the local community. We work for you.
Yeah.
And we're there to protect communities and the people who know best about the impact of that is the local firefighters. So what people can do to support us is look into the campaigns that have been run. Look at FBU Scotland and the Cuts Leave Scars campaign. There's QR codes that allow you to email your local MSPs and your local MPs. If you see us on a demo, or if you're part of a local community, for example, at Marienville, the Live and Rent have been magic with that local campaign. Go along, listen to what's been said. Have your voice, contribute to the public consultation. Contribute to the petitions. Now that public consultation has been closed, but yeah, wherever you see the opportunity, just from anything as basic as giving us a toot and a wave if there's somebody standing at a demo, or going online and signing up to the petitions and all that. And as for the question about us being, it's easier to cut service and all when we're divided. He's absolutely right. And he's a great example of FBU education. So Ted did an introductory branch officials course. I chaired these courses and had a fantastic head of education, Lindsay McDowell, and watching reps come in who weren't having their arms put up their back. This is one thing I have to say. Like 200 learners in 3 years, and they all wanted to become reps and get involved.
Which is hugely important.
It's massive, and it's such a change. It's such a cultural change within the union for people to be like, I saw what was going on in that demo, and I really wanted to get involved. Or you helped me out in a problem I was having, that sort of thing. So Ted went through that education pathway and was given the confidence and the a bit of understanding his rights, responsibilities as a rep, how to build a branch and that. And Leukaemia wasn't a particularly strong branch a wee while ago. They had one rep. Now they're a really good, formidable force. The whole branch is involved, and they've got all the positions filled in that. So that's been really good, and Ted's been exceptional. But we've just done a tour of the east of Scotland. The east official, Stevie Ware and Lewis Clark, had arranged a kind of organising tour. Obviously, trade unions about organising, grassroots organising. We got round, I represented, the region, and we got round all 23 whole-time branches in the east of Scotland. Had 3 branch meetings a day, and met with people from, every single fire station from Hoyk through Fife, out to Falkirk, West Lothian and all that. And getting in and chatting to people about the big things that are going on, pay, the national discussions around pay reform, about introducing sort of pay spines into the fire service, rather than the kind of flat pay scale that we're on at the moment. The importance of organising, the importance of where we're headed with service delivery review, that we might need to be taking industrial action at some point soon. It seems likely, with the way that things are going financially, and you talked at the very start about the kind of geopolitical conflicts that are going on, and economic and societal shocks that can come from that. So it's hard to see how we don't bear the brunt of that again. Yeah. And there has to be a line in the sand. So we've been going around all the branches talking to people, and that is the general feeling. But yeah, as far as what we are doing, we encourage people to get on education courses. We encourage people to become reps. We encourage everybody on the branch to become an active member, and we'll go out and support them in whatever way we can. But we need, for branches that are working well, magic. For branches that have maybe got 1 or 2 reps in them, or haven't seen a union official for a while, they should get in touch. I mean, there was a councillor on Shetland that got in touch with us about facilities and that up there. Yeah. And me and John McKenzie went all the way to Shetland. We met FBU members from across there, went round the islands, and we've got a regional retained rep who works at Lerwick now, and we're present in from all the way from Shetland all the way down to the border. So yeah, we do have to be united, and we're going into tough times, and the only way that we're going to win any of these fights if we are kind of solid, united, and showing that kind of solidarity to each other.
Amazing. Gus, thank you so much for doing this, mate, and
Scott,
thank you
it's been my pleasure.
The FBU do as well. Awesome. Cheers, man.
No, thank you.